Moving on then, if nobody has any further comment, Greek religion. The Greeks had 12 main deities called the Olympian deities. They believed that their gods resided on Mount Olympus. That's why they're called Olympian. Now, Mount Olympus, you might say, hadn't they been to Mount Olympus? Yes, they had. Mount Olympus was not too far away. And yes, they could climb it. Mount Olympus was covered by clouds, but they believed that the gods resided not in the physical dimension of our senses where we could see them, but around the corner, outside of our physical dimension. There were 12 main ones and hundreds of lesser gods. The number one god was Zeus, also known as the god of thunder, god of lightning, god of storms. In addition, there is Ares. The Romans called him Mars, the god of war. And Ares had two servants, Phobos and Deimos, dread and terror. I mean, dread and terror are associated with wars. And then we found out that the planet Ares, or Mars, has two moons, which were named after his two servants, Phobos and Deimos. The Romans have worshipped the same gods by different names. I'll put the Roman names later. In addition, there was the goddess of wisdom, Athena. Now, each of these cities had their own patron deity. In the case of Athens, their goddess was Athena. And as you go to a theater and see this really slender woman with a look sitting like on a cloud, standing on a cloud, that is a depiction of Athena. And they had a big temple dedicated to her, and inside the temple was a huge statue of her. Goddess of wisdom. Sparta, their patron god was Ares. Aphrodite, the Romans called her Venus. Aphrodite, goddess of sex, fertility, love, emotion. Chief city was Corinth. And so on and so forth. There were some others. Oh yeah, of the sea. Chief god was Poseidon. Now I'm a little. I believe the Romans called him Neptune, and the Greeks Poseidon. If I'm wrong, you correct me. It's the same deity, Neptune, Poseidon. Supposedly Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades were brothers, and when they had overthrown their father Saturn, they divided the universe among, with Zeus taking the material world, the world of the living, and Hades taking the nether world, the world of the dead, and Poseidon taking the sea. And yes?
One of the stories said they played the game. Hades came out on the bottom, so yeah, just like at the end of the world.
That might have been the case.
And out all of them, Hades is the oldest, Zeus the youngest, Poseidon's the middle kid.
Yeah. Again, how many of you have read Greek mythology? A few of you. Okay, just a few. Now, on the subject of Hades. The Roman name for Hades, by the way, is Pluto. The Greeks did not really have much of a view of the afterlife. Like the Sumerians before them, their view of the afterlife is when we die, we become nothing more than mind-numbed zombies. We don't speak to each other, we don't know each other, we just simply go around in a very aimless existence. Now, a few, the heroes, the really good heroes, went to a better place than that, but for most of the Greeks, they had nothing to look forward to in the afterlife. And some people believe that this is one of the reasons that Christianity was able to spread later, because Christianity promised a better afterlife than Greek mythology did. Now, in addition, the Greeks believed in oracles. There were a few places on earth where the gods communicated with men. Their big oracle was the oracle at Delphi. Delphi was the oracle to Apollo, or the sun god. Now, I've already mentioned how that in the story of Oedipus, the oracle at Delphi foretold that that Oedipus would grow up and kill his father, marry his mother. When we talk about Alexander the Great, Alexander's father visited the oracle at Delphi, and so did Alexander himself. And they got answers. Now, folk, this is something you won't get in an ordinary history, even a theology class, but I must state it. There's been all kinds of speculation. How come the Greeks lost interest in these gods? And how come Christianity was able to make such headway? One reason was that the oracles seemed to just quit speaking to them. Their gods seemed to turn their back on them and abandon them. Now, if the oracle had been a complete fake, there would have been no reason for them to stop the fakery. They could have just kept on with the fakery. But if all of a sudden they were getting messages from Apollo, getting messages from these gods, and then all of a sudden the priestess said, hey, Apollo doesn't communicate with me anymore. So the oracle at Delphi fell to disuse, and today it's just a bunch of a heap of rubble, a bunch of stones. It just seemed to them like their gods had quit communicating with them. And the Greeks then went through, when I was in graduate school, I had to read a book about the 5 stages of Greek religion. They became less and less religious as time went on. They eventually even lost interest in their deities, in their Olympian deities. You can see this in the progression through Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. It wasn't just that the homosexual progression where you have Socrates, the man who tried to fight it and may have partially overcome it, to Plato, who justified it, to Aristotle, who doesn't matter, didn't even bother to justify it. Well, the same thing in their view of spiritual matters. Socrates was one of the most spiritual men who ever lived. Plato was himself an extremely spiritual man, but perhaps not as much so as Socrates. Then came Aristotle, and Aristotle free on the spirit world. All that matters is the mundane here and now. There's a famous painting, and I don't think your book shows it, about Plato and Aristotle arguing. Plato has his hand pointing toward heaven. Hey, this is the solution. Aristotle has his hand pointing down to earth. Hey, the solution is here on earth. The Greeks became less and less religious and more skeptical as time went on, up to a point. Then all of a sudden, the new generation of Greeks arose who became extremely religious again. And this was before Christianity, by the way. They became extremely interested in the spiritual matters, not necessarily the Olympian deities. They started worshiping Isis of Egypt and started taking an interest in religions called mystery religions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All right. The Greeks also had they practiced animal sacrifice. We do not know if they ever had practiced human sacrifice, but they practiced animal sacrifice, and they would open up the entrails of animals, or open up animals, look at their entrails to try to determine the will of the gods by that means. The economy, the Greek peninsula is not very fertile and extremely mountainous, very difficult to farm, so the Greeks had to do a lot of trading. Athens in particular only imported about 20% of what it needed to eat, so it had to trade. And they would trade with the more fertile regions of Asia Minor and Italy in order to get substance for themselves. I've already talked about family relationships, so then I'll move on to the next big topic. Macedonia. The Greeks could not unite themselves. Try as they might, every attempt they made, and at one point all the Greek armies got together on two sides and the battle was a draw. Sparta thought they could conquer all of Greece, but eventually Sparta met with Thebes, and the Spartans had 10,000 men on our side and the Thebans only had 6,000. But the Theban general figured, if I can get around their flanks, so he put 50 men deep. In other words, instead of putting 5 or 6 deep, he put 50 men deep around Sparta's flank and hit Sparta from the side. And again, that was a weakness. Now here's where Sparta's training proved to be bad. When the Spartan general saw that Sparta had been outflanked by the Thebans, he did what he should have. He said, hey, they're outflanked. That my men are fighting with the army and with the enemy in front of them. They're being hit by the side, and of course, if you could get around their flank, you defeat them. He said, I know what I'll do. I'll call for a retreat, and then regroup my men and send them out to fight again. So he ordered a retreat. The problem was the Spartan men said, retreat? Well, I've been in an army. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were in the army. They never retreated. I'm not going to retreat. So half of the men did retreat and half didn't. The half who didn't got pretty well annihilated, and the other half was there was not enough of them left to mount a good fight. So the Spartans returned back to their home in defeat, which was something that had never happened to them before. And then when they got there, they found their Helots in a state of revolt. The Helots had joined with 2 or 3 other local city-states, and all Sparta could do was make some kind of peace treaty. They didn't fight their Helots this time. They made a peace treaty, greatly in favor of the Helots. Well, the Helots, in the meantime, a lot of them had slipped off and left Messenia. Well, all of a sudden, a lot of them started to return, so their population started growing leaps and bounds when a lot of them came back home. Then an earthquake struck, killed 25,000 Spartans and hardly touched the Helots. In addition, the Spartan couples were practicing birth control because they couldn't afford to send their children to the Spartan military camps. The result was the Spartan population declined, went out, pretty much out of existence. So Sparta, well, Thebes, the city that had beaten Sparta, they almost had the hegemony, but Athens recovered, and Athens went in, and then Corinth came up, became prominent also. So you had a whole bunch of city-states, and none of them could get the hegemony. And this went on, endless wars to where nobody could win. And the Greek people got tired of all these wars, try as they might.